This is not a series about games you haven't heard of. This is a series about games everyone has heard of. Games that everyone has an opinion on, regardless of whether they've played them or not. Games whose actual qualities have been buried in a narrative, whether good or bad. Games that everyone always makes the exact same comments about. Games that are in desperate need of a second opinion. Hi everybody, Dr. I. Coleman here with a PhD in fighting like a dairy farmer. You know, it's nice to get back to something normal for once. You know, no guest voiceovers, no elaborate storylines, no weird characters, just me, you, the audience, and a nice, serious, critical discussion about video games.
Hello there, Doctor.
Oh hey, Sock Puppet Hagen, what's up?
I contain multitudes. 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 I contain multitudes.
I honestly don't know what's wrong with me, but I hope that you will all enjoy this week's episode of Second Opinion, which is about the Monkey Island games. Not just the two Monkey Island games everybody talks about, but all of them, especially the underappreciated sequels, Curse of Monkey Island, Escape from Monkey Island, and Tales of Monkey Island. We're going to be talking about why those games might be better than you remember or better than you've heard, and yeah, enjoy it, giving them a much-needed second opinion.
Multitudes!
Sorry, Doc, but I think I should get a second opinion.
I adore point-and-click adventure games. Oh, sure, I've done previous second opinion features about why Day of the Tentacle has some serious flaws, or why Grim Fandango is crazy overrated, but you have to understand that those sorts of pieces can only come from a place of deep and abiding love, if not for those specific games, which I do like, by the way, then for the genre as a whole. The question then is that if I don't think those are the best adventure games, like everyone else does, what then is the best point-and-click of all time? Well, the game that really defines the genre for me, the shining gold yardstick by which all others must be measured, is the Curse of Monkey Island. But hark! What's this? A YouTube comment approaches, informing me that I have no idea what I'm talking about, because obviously I misspoke and said Curse of instead of Secret of, or more likely, LeChuck's Revenge. But nope. Curse is my favorite, and while I think it has some serious mechanical flaws, I think the best story of any of the games was Tales of Monkey Island. And actually, LeChuck's Revenge is actually my least favorite of any of the games by far. Now, to some of you, this whole discussion is going to seem like a ridiculous exercise in minutia, which is a pretentious way of saying, who cares? But the thing is, within the community of Monkey Island fans, it's widely accepted that the first two games are brilliant, stellar examples of the genre, the third game is okay at best, and the two most recent games are garbage. And I couldn't agree less with that assessment. In fact, this topic was the very first idea I wrote down for Second Opinion. And while I decided not to start with it because I realized that these games have a much smaller fan base than, say, Overwatch, I've waited long enough. It's time to finally give the Monkey Island sequels their due. So, let's set up a realm of discourse. What, in general, makes a good Monkey Island game? Well, a lot of things, but I'd say there's three main factors. 1. Story. Like any point-and-click adventure game, the gameplay really just serves to give you something to do. The story's why you're really there. The second is the puzzles, because even if they're secondary, frustrating puzzles can ruin the whole experience for you. And the third is comedy. Monkey Island bills itself as a comedy series, so if the jokes don't make you laugh, it's really not doing its job. The great thing about Monkey Island at its best is that the three important elements are often woven together. For example, the famous insult sword fighting section in the first game. It's obviously funny, as you and your opponent trade ridiculous insults like, "You fight like a cow." It's also a really fun gameplay mechanic, a puzzle that requires thinking about dialogue and learning new phrases, instead of collecting and combining items. And it actually serves as storytelling. Initially, we see that Guybrush is so dumb that he can't think of obvious retorts to his opponent's insults, but that he's also so single-minded in his quest to become a pirate that he won't let anything stop him, remaining unflappable even as you fail your quest 100 times. It also establishes Carla the Swordmaster, who's built up as this fierce warrior, and and is this fierce warrior, but when you meet her, you find that she is absolutely not the person you expected her to be. Far from a terrifying figure, she'll later end up joining your crew. To my mind, no game in the series does this better than Curse of Monkey Island. Its story, while simple, is compelling, full of interesting and likable characters, and superbly written, taking place across a number of really cool locations. It's the only game in the series where I can't think of a single puzzle that was frustrating or unfair in some way. And as for the comedy, well...
Even the bravest of men must dread the horror of this place. Steel your courage, boy, now, before you gaze upon the terrible, horrible face of... Skull Island.
That's a duck.
What are you talking about? Don't you see the skull?
This island doesn't look like a skull at all. It looks like a great, big, enormous duck. It should be called Duck Island.
Well, you see, you gotta squint and sort of turn your head and... Ooh, it's just so scary.
If you squint and turn your head, it looks like a bunny.
Well, anyway, see...
Throw in an even better version of insult sword fighting, a brilliant mid-game musical number, some gorgeous hand-drawn graphics that will always be the definitive Monkey Island look, far more than 3D weirdness, bricky pixels in front of badly scanned backgrounds, or and the best sidekick character in gaming.
Oh, right, I know a lot about lifting curses. That's why I'm a disembodied talking skull, sitting on top of a spike in the middle of a swamp.
You seem bitter.
I'm sorry, it's been a rough day.
And you've got a pretty obvious choice for best in the series. The 4th and 5th games might not be quite as masterful, but in a lot of ways they are better than their predecessors. I would argue that they all have better stories. The original Monkey Island, which I love, by the way, is almost pure comedy, and doesn't have more plot than guy really wants to become a pirate, so he does, and also he falls in love with a girl whose ex is a ghost, so that's a whole thing. And LeChuck's Revenge... right, I want this to be a more positive video, because I feel like this series has been really negative lately, but man, LeChuck's Revenge is disappointing for me. It's about 80 to 90% the best game in the series, but its plot favors shock value over good storytelling, a Tim Schafer trademark. Like, oh, you thought Guybrush and Elaine would be together at the end of the last game, but they're not, because it's way better to rehash the same plot of them falling in love a second time, rather than see what it would be like if their relationship had actually gone forward, so they're broken up for no reason. Or hey, what if we threw a curveball at the end by having the worst ending in gaming? Yeah, that's right, the worst ending in gaming. Because not only is it vague and comes completely out of nowhere, but if you take it at face value, then it means LeChuck mind-controlled Guybrush and won. It's an ending that means everything you've been working for in the last 2 games was for nothing. Because LeChuck survives and gets to keep doing evil. And not in a way where you feel like it's tragic, but in a way where it feels like the game has stolen from you. And I know there's lots of theories about what it really means, but listen to the developer's commentary in the special edition. The creators didn't want to tell some deeper story. They wanted a shock ending that would get talked about. The ending of LeChuck's Revenge is so bad that it ruins the plots of not 1, but 2 games. And I give the 3rd game extra credit because it actually managed to salvage that overflowing toilet of a finale and build off it in a way that was actually good. Right, sorry, back to the good games. While LeChuck's Revenge fumbles as it tries to make its first steps into telling a deeper and more unique story with its characters, the sequels do a much better job. Like how Escape from Monkey Island is a story about rampant capitalism eroding traditional values, featuring an evil billionaire buying up the world at the expense of others' civil rights, in what was written as a parody of Rupert Murdoch but works remarkably well as a satirical take on certain other rich public figures I could think of. It even has an election where people are so sick of the status quo that they elect a woefully underqualified candidate who puts forward simple, short, memorable phrases over concrete policies. I'll admit I'm pretty much just taking the piss at this point, but still, it's a story that does dive into some deeper themes, and tells a rich story that, in terms of scope and consequences for the Caribbean, feels much bigger than anything that came before it, which was basically the stories of these 2 guys constantly fighting over a girl who could kick both their butts without blinking. Plus, Escape's cast is a real who's who of famous voice actors, all putting in amazing performances, and I'll never understand why everyone hated Charity James as Elaine so much, cause I think she does a fantastic job. And then there's Tales of Monkey Island. Holy crap. At this point, Telltale's penchant for amazing amazing storytelling is well known, and they were at the top of their game in Tales. Since I know very few people actually played that one, I'll try not to give away any spoilers, but it's a story that subverts a lot of expectations the series has. Guybrush and Elaine's relationship, LeChuck's cycle of reincarnation, the voodoo lady as an uninvolved observer, but without changing what made those aspects what they are. For example, it looks at Guybrush and Elaine's marriage from a different angle and tells a new story with that, without just breaking them up and going back to square one. And speaking of things it did better than LeChuck's Revenge, its ending goes to a really dark place, but it's a darkness that's earned and built up throughout the rest of the game. Something that's heartbreaking without coming completely tonally out of left field, in part because rather than it being a 3-minute cutscene at the very end, it takes place over the last episode and a half of the game. Tales of Monkey Island is a masterclass in storytelling, with one of the best narratives of any game, and it's certainly better than anything else in this series. Puzzles, too, are often better in the sequels, because they don't come from the masochistic time where Sierra was still killing you for looking at an object funny. If you didn't like a puzzle in an old LucasArts game, you could go get hosed, because you weren't going to be able to afford any other games this month, and we didn't have a huge back catalog of better experiences to enjoy. They really didn't care how accessible the gameplay was. So you had stuff like the Monkey Wrench puzzle, or a puzzle where you have to dump out a mug of poisoned grog, but you can't use grog on floor, or use grog with any of the other cups in your inventory, or use poisoned grog with the mug of unpoisoned grog to swap them. The only way to beat that puzzle is to dump it specifically into the plant, because Tim Schafer saw a movie once where that happened and wanted to make a reference to it. Now, there are still bad puzzles, fair enough. As I said before, I think Curse is the only one that gets a free pass here. Escape from Monkey Island, for example, has a rock puzzle that relies on inhuman levels of expert timing. And the last episode of Tales of Monkey Island involves walking a ridiculously long path between two areas over and over again to perform menial tasks. But I'll still stand by my claim that the sequels are less frustrating overall than the first games. And if you think that's not true, it's probably because you, like me, have played the original games so much that you've forgotten how awfully unintuitive they actually are. And for the record, monkey combat really isn't that bad. Sure, unlike insult sword fighting, it's not that funny, but it's really not hard if you take notes, which is something you used to have to do in games all the time. There's 4 stances, each stance beats and is beaten by one other stance. Switching between stances takes combinations of 3 monkey noises. It's rock, paper, scissors with a little extra difficulty thrown in for flavor, and everybody acts like it's the worst thing to ever happen to video games. At least they told you what you were supposed to be doing. That's more than I can say for half the puzzles in the original games. And yet, despite all this, people still criticize these 3 games unfairly. Why? Well, there's 2 main arguments. 1, they're not enough like the old Monkey Island games. 2, they're too much like the old Monkey Island games, and don't innovate enough. Now, if you're thinking very carefully, you might be able to spot a logical flaw there. A lot of the time, these are 2 separate arguments, but in my research for this video, I saw plenty of times where the same person made both statements with no self-awareness whatsoever. Just as an example, Zero Punctuation's review of the first 2 episodes of Tales claims that it's both too scared to do anything new with the series, and that he's disappointed because they changed Guybrush's character too much. What these arguments are really saying are, this game isn't exactly like the 2 games that came out when I was a kid, therefore I hate it, therefore it's a bad sequel, and I'm trying to find ways to justify that opinion. Still, we'll treat these arguments as serious and address them in turn. First of all, the games stick too closely to the original formula, the product of, depending on the story, fanboys who love the original games too much to try changing them up, or corporate committees scared of doing anything original that might cost them money. Really. Every game but Escape goes almost entirely to new locations, with Tales of Monkey Island never even going to Monkey Island. Escape makes LeChuck the secondary antagonist and turns ridiculous one-joke hermit Herman Toothrot into the Deus Ex Machina that saves the day. LeChuck becomes a fire-breathing devil, a shape-shifting statue, a normal guy, and a creature of pure voodoo magic. And if these changes seem superficial, it's only because I didn't want to get into larger spoilers, so fair warning. Curse of Monkey Island is about Guybrush finally proving himself to be Elaine's equal so that it makes sense when they finally get married. Escape is a Butch Cassidy-style story about finding your own irrelevance and bringing the funny anachronisms that have always been part of the series setting to the forefront. And Tales Tales is a dark exploration of what would happen if Guybrush actually failed for once, seeing what it would take to break the universe's most affable idiot and even get him to question his faithfulness to Elaine. Each one was designed not only with different stories, but with very different feels and design sensibilities. Curse is a cartoon, Escape is a sweeping, swashbuckling adventure that inserts modern elements into fantasy a la The Adventure Zone, and Tales is a sort of darker, plot-based game you'd expect from the people who'd go on to do The Walking Dead. Okay, so that argument's ludicrous, but what about being too different then? Surely that's reasonable based on what I've just said. Well, again, I think this is an argument mostly motivated by nostalgia, because if you think that Elaine breaking up with Guybrush over something we've never seen, and a bizarre ending about a carnival, and Guybrush suddenly having a beard and turning into a career criminal isn't a big change, but that the giant monkey head turning out to have been built for a more significant purpose is, you're blinded by nostalgia. Man, people are mad about that giant monkey head thing, despite it being little more than a weird bit of set dressing in the original game. Weird. Now, I wonder why someone might ascribe enormous importance to a minor aspect of something they loved as a child. Wonder if there's a word for that. Here's my counter-argument. Everything that needs to stay the same in order for it to be a Monkey Island game stays the same. They all have those three elements of puzzles, comedy, and story, and they all do all three pretty well. What's more, all the important elements of said story are in place. Guybrush might get a little more competent throughout the series because it would strain credulity if he'd saved the Caribbean 4 times and still had no idea how to handle LeChuck at the beginning of Tales, but he's always in way over his head. In the first game, he wanders into a conflict he didn't even realize was happening, and in the 5th game, he wanders out of a situation he still barely understands. He and Elaine still remain the perfect example of opposites attracting, often at odds but always caring for each other, just like a real relationship. Elaine herself is still the baddest bitch in the Caribbean, although admittedly the 3rd game does make her more of a damsel in distress, which is its biggest flaw. And LeChuck will always be the slightly ridiculous, completely love-struck monster, and even when it looks like he might be working for or with someone else, he always turns out to be the evilest villain in the Caribbean. These character traits have remained intact for decades now. And sure, the writers might have chosen to do different things with those same characters and those same traits, but that's just because nobody wants to hear the same story 5 different times. I mean, right? That's not what you guys want, right? Look, I know a lot of minds will probably remain unchanged at the end of this video. Sure, the Monkey Island sequels do have their problems. In fact, I think I've done a fair job of pointing those out throughout this video. But so do the originals, come to that. And if you're letting yourself be so blinded by nostalgia that you refuse to accept anything but the perfect originals, when the succeeding games have even had a lot of the same team working on them, you're missing out on 3 really fantastic video game experiences. So instead of getting mad at me in the comments, let's all join hands, set aside our differences, and remember the lesson that's really important. Never pay more than $20 for a computer game. Well, there you have it. Hopefully this video has made you look at the Monkey Island series in a new light. Maybe seen that those sequels aren't as bad. Maybe you'll want to go back and play them now. Except not Escape from Monkey Island, because that one's not available and doesn't work on modern computers, and not Curse of Monkey Island, because that one's not available either. You can only get it to work with Scum VM, and even then, it might not work. My copy doesn't, for some reason. So, at Disney, when are you gonna release those special editions? I mean, come on, you're telling me that a Curse of Monkey Island special edition wouldn't print money? I mean, you guys control everything now. Surely you can do that. For me? Okay. Well, either way, thank you very much for watching this video, and yeah, Monkey Island sequels, much better than they get credit for, and that's my professional opinion.
Sleep now.
Oh god! Thanks for watching this episode of Second Opinion. If you want to read more about the 3rd and 4th Monkey Island games in detail, since I only had so much time in the video, I highly recommend checking out John Walker's articles about them on Eurogamer. They're pretty much spot on in my opinion. If you have a game you think needs a second opinion, be sure to let me know in the comments, and there's a good chance your idea will be covered on the show. New episodes go up every Friday night. If you want to see more work from me and the rest of the talented Hey Poor Player team, be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter or check out HeyPoorPlayer.com, where I do a lot of reviews. If you know someone you think would like the show, please tweet about it or share it on Facebook. Or just spread the word. Every extra view proves the show is viable and ensures that I can make more episodes. Until then, stay professional, stay opinionated. Just as a reminder, I get paid to do this. What do you think of that?
You should be fired.
Yeah, probably right.